Everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, The Last Nighters, and The Last Nighters is part of the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. This is going to be episode 57 of the show on Starship Troopers, so Heinz 57 style, and it's also a time where we're going to kick off our new show artwork. So you will see new space age themed artwork for the Last Nighters show on our site at lastnighters.com and also on the Launchpad Media. So be on the lookout for that. It's super awesome. It's also the centerfold of the new Voluntarist Origins 2 comic book that is just now being released out into the wild. So super awesome. So lastnighters.com/57 is the show notes page. We have Mike C. He's a returning guest. He was with us just last week talking about, what the heck were we talking about? Collateral. That's right. And we were going to do Super Troopers.
No, we were not.
Starship Troopers. We've done Super Troopers long ago. But we mentioned at the end of the
Troopers are way more super than Super Troopers.
Oh man, this is a train wreck already. So at the end of last week, we said, hey, we're going to do Starship Troopers next week. And Mike C said, oh, I'd love to do that with you guys. And so we're like, oh, yeah, come on. Sure, dude. Yeah. Right. And then
I invited myself.
Then out of guilt and wanting to save face, we invited him back. No, actually, he's a great guest and we really enjoy him. So
our first back-to-back.
Yeah, our first. Well, we did do a couple of two-parters in the past, I think.
Yeah, that's right. We did do Dark Batman with Shaheen.
Right, but this is the first two different movies back to back, and so this is quite the distinction. So, Mike, thank you for coming back. You tell the audience a little bit where they can find your Mechanical Dream Revolution on the SoundCloud, right? And we've got the link to that on the show notes pages for this episode and the previous episode on Collateral.
Oh, thanks kindly. Yeah, it's Mechanical Dream Revolution on SoundCloud. That's pretty much the long and short of it. I don't know. It's fun stuff. Check it out. It'll be in the show notes. Also, last week, we benefited greatly from a video by a YouTube channel called The Storytellers. And I just wanted to shout them out because they were the first interaction I had where I realized that you didn't have to be a postmodernist Marxist to make videos about movies on YouTube. So it was kind of nice to see kind of a not conservative view, but a rational view that just kind of looked at the actual movies. So that was kind of cool. And yeah, check my music out if you like my music, I guess.
All right. I highly recommend it. I actually listened to it myself, and I like it. I enjoy it very much.
Did you hear the RoboCop one?
Yeah. And that's the other... See, this is the other thing about you being a guest. Every time we talk to you, it's like you mentioned 3 or 4 other movies that we should do. So RoboCop is one of them. Gattaca is another. And there was the Room that you mentioned last year that you wanted to talk about. So there's so many things. So we might have you back, and we'll probably need to spread it out a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But
thanks for having me, though.
Yes. Thank you for coming back. So let's get into this thing. This is Starship Troopers, and the Google description information is this came out 1997, a thriller mystery film, 2 hours and 9 minutes, and it feels every minute of it. It's very long. 7.2 on the IMDb, 63% Rotten Tomatoes, 51% on the Metacritic. So a little bit splitsies there, but 93% of Google users like it. So here's the description. In the distant future, the Earth is at war with a race of giant alien insects. Little is known about the bugs except that they are intent on the eradication of all human life. But there was a time before the war. A mobile infantry travels to distant alien planets to take the war to the bugs. They are a ruthless enemy with only one mission: survival of their species, no matter what the cost. Came out November 7, 1997. And I'm going to need your help on the director's name here, Mike. It's Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, Paul Verhoeven.
And he's freaky deaky Dutch. Is that right?
Sounds like it. Sounds Dutch.
And I'm referencing Austin Powers 3. By the way, I'm not being super racist here.
You can be racist against white people.
I guess it's okay. So a budget of $100 million, box office of $121.2 million. And this was the start of a film series of, lowering levels of quality, I think. But this is based on loosely based on a Robert Heinlein novel of the same name, Starship Troopers. And there's an interesting backstory around that I'm sure we will get into. But let's go to Robert for your initial opening salvo comments.
Well, I was surprised to find out that they're still making these things. There was one made in 2017. They've made 5 of them or something like that. I had no idea that this was a series that people watch. I imagine they're kind of like Sci-Fi Channel level, $10 million, Sharknado style effects and that sort of thing. But this movie, it actually looks pretty good. What I like about this movie a lot is you can enjoy it on multiple levels. You've got your intergalactic bug hunt level, and then you've got your interpersonal romance kind of relationship level. But then you got this philosophical level where his world building, Heinlein's world building, really comes into play with the way he structured this society. And I think that's probably where we're going to find the most meat and potatoes in this episode, is deconstructing all that. But overall, it was fun. But it's fun on all those different levels. So it's all wrapped up into one movie. And there's a lot of speculation and a lot of commentary around this movie. And that's all surprising to me too. People have said it's a comedy. I mean, not a comedy, but a satire. And I'm eager to get Mike's view on exactly what it's satirizing.
Yeah, Mike, we would like to know more. So do your part and let us know.
Okay, so Mr. Verhoeven makes satire so compelling that the thing he's satirizing looks awesome. I guess he's satirizing National Socialism in the most utopian sort of version, and a globalist sort of version of that. I love this movie on a few different levels. The boy in me, the sort of fascist part of me, loves the fascistic stuff, and then I can kind of distance myself from it with the satirical nature. So it's so over the top, and it's so sort of hyper masculine, and so rousing that you can kind of just enjoy it as a story. And another thing I like about Verhoeven is that he makes movies that have a beginning and an end. And the idea of making a sequel to this seems preposterous, because it ended and that's it. Like, you don't really need to keep going with the war, because the whole point was that it's essentially like a propaganda film, about humanity overcoming these bugs. Like, the whole thing, it's half documentary and half propaganda film, and it's not really like an action movie, but it is. I don't know. It just completely sells it for me. So
I find it kind of interesting. Robert shared a Sargon of Akkad video with me, and I didn't get through the whole thing, but it seemed like he was pointing out how popular this is just in general, like in this cult classic kind of sense. And a lot of people are looking at this and really enjoying it. But in the origin of it, Paul Verhoeven, did I say his name right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, whatever. He's not here to defend himself. And
well, apparently the history of it is that this movie, the script was already written, the story was already written, and it was only later that they acquired the rights to Heinlein's novel.
Interesting.
Or like the place names and some of the character names, but very much of the story is very different. And it's, like you said, very satirical. And I think the director was trying to make it be a very anti-war film, but by going over the top pro-war in this kind of B-movie, war movie, that it's so ridiculous in that respect that it makes it become an anti-war movie. And this is back, might we add, 1997, back when the left was dependably against war. I'm curious to hear his opinion today. But in a way, I feel like
we were happy to intervene, Sorry, continue.
Well, I think the left was a little bit more against intervention in the past. Like,
fair enough.
Not domestically, but internationally.
Or like peacekeeping in quotation marks.
Yeah, that's probably okay. But anyway, this might be one of the greatest troll jobs in film history, because
considering that it doesn't really cash, it doesn't really seem like a troll by the end. You're almost in favor of his ideas.
Right, but Verhoeven said that he started reading the Heinlein novel and only made it about a chapter and a half, 2 chapters in.
Yeah.
He was like, this is just too authoritarian, too fascistic for me, so I'm going to go basically do the opposite with this movie, but in this kind of, over-the-top way. And so it's it really changes the sentiment of the novel. And I'm sure if Heinlein were around, he would have been very upset with this.
Yeah, well, Stephen King was upset with Kubrick's Shining.
Well, I got to go with Kubrick on that one.
Yeah, exactly. Like, fuck him, it's a different medium. Sorry, I shouldn't swear so much. My sister told me she listened to the podcast and said I should tone down that.
Well, we do mark it explicit, so not safe for sensitive ears, The Last Nighters.
I don't know.
But anyway, I found that pretty interesting because he didn't even read the novel all the way through. They already had the story written, and it's not like Starship Troopers. I mean, it was a very popular novel when it came out, 59, I think, and it won an award in 1960. But I'm sure 35 years later, when they were talking about making this film, that it wasn't still top of mind in, science fiction circles. So it wasn't like they were trying to cash in on the name or the characters or the story even. I think that it was trying to use the name and use it in a way to almost trash it, if you know what I mean.
I would definitely call this a satire of the novel without having read the whole novel the same as Verhoeven.
Right. I mean, this is all speculation, which is kind of what we do here. But
Oh yeah, maybe it's not a satire of the National Socialist sort of utopia that is depicted so much as a satire of the novel itself that presents this idea. If that,
right, but the idea of the novel, because he didn't
yeah,
even read the novel.
no, that's what I mean. Like he just kind of got into whatever chapter 3, and he's like, it's too right wing for me.
Right. And really, I mean, Heinlein, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and a bunch of his other works, very libertarian and has some great quotes. I've got him up on one of my websites. And I think that he does make a very compelling argument for individualism and freedom. And I don't see where the bent came from for this sort of authoritarianism.
Well,
this novel, but
the authoritarianism within the society depicted allows for individuals to succeed and celebrates their achievements individually while in service to the collective. So that's the long and short of the appeal of National Socialism, is that the it celebrates strength and intelligence and ridicules weakness, and its might is right, and the superior will win in the end. And I don't know, that's the appeal of it, right? It provides freedom within the boundaries, and then it beats anybody that steps out of those boundaries back into submission. So I think it's presented really well in this film. I think he depicts it perfectly. Like, the children are fighting over a rifle, and as they're handing out like bullets, they're stepping on bugs, and they're all doing their part. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to apologize for it yet, but I can do that later.
All right. Well, prime that apology for later. Let's go to Robert. I'd like to know more.
Well, I don't know. The whether Heinlein was actually, reflecting his own philosophy in this film, or whether it's more towards libertarianism. But if the claim is that this society is somehow in any way libertarian, I would horrifically beg to differ. I can't imagine that anybody is seriously saying that. Am I strawmanning something right now? It sounds like I am, because this society is horrifically authoritarian.
Yes, very much.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
The one thing that I think is actually a step in the right direction is, and it's a very hesitant step here, that the service equals citizenship. So only those with a stake in the society have a voting right. And that goes back to like medieval Europe, when there were city-states and competing authorities, where only the people who were landed, only the people who had property that would be removed from them, like in taxes, would be able to vote on those taxes. And so in that way, there was a consent of the governed. Granted, it was, if you're outvoted, you don't really have the consent, but it wasn't people who would not be taxed voting to tax people. It was the people who would be taxed voting on those taxes. And in that regard, I think that would be an improvement on the present system.
Yeah.
Are you saying that this film depicts something like that?
Yeah, there's a two-tier democracy. So the democracy only exists with people that are willing to join the army.
You only can vote when you do that. Yes, you can only run for office once you run through your service. But the Federation still taxes you whether or not you do that.
No, for sure. But
so it's essentially taxation without representation.
Oh, absolutely. But it's
you can't even get a child. You can't even get a permit to have a child.
Yeah, but it's got my vote above the democracies we have right now, which are just open to anybody without any stake in it. Issue. I think it's an improvement on that system, where a bunch of people can get together to vote somebody's money.
So why can't they just have their own thing? Just have your own little society over here, and then you guys can go all do that and have a stake in whatever, and then just leave me alone.
Yes, absolutely. Sounds great.
Yeah, like we would in our libertarian society. You could have a commune and be socialist, be communist, whatever. Just leave me out.
Label a terrorist and attacked by the government.
Right. But it still is an improvement in another respect. Like there are some countries where there is compulsory military service, and there had been the history of a draft in the United States, and this is at least voluntary, right? You can choose to join up to get citizenship.
They don't draft you, true, but they're still going to tax you regardless.
No, but it's the philosophy is a separation of the weak and the strong, or the intellect and the dedicated. So only people that are willing to put a personal stake into the society and protect it with their lives have the right to participate in the political process.
Yeah, I'm not
have the right to rule over everybody else who doesn't also join in.
But this what they are describing is an answer to democracy, which is essentially a soft form of communism.
Well, I'm with you guys on the whole, voting for stuff for free and not having it cost anything.
Yeah, like it's just an answer, right?
Right. I'm with you on that. But this idea that, well, we're just going to have everybody be volunteering into this system, and then you get all these benefits, and then you get to extract the wealth out of everybody else that doesn't join in.
Yeah, but I think the conversation you're going to be having about this is just like, it's on a completely other level than this film, which is kind of utopianist. Like it doesn't, because the society is so high functioning.
Yeah, unbelievably high functioning.
Yeah,
what are you talking about?
Everything is clear.
You guys are both crazy.
The dialogue is not subtle in any way. Everyone is 100% clear on their positions on things. And even the bad guys in the movie are wonderfully upstanding, righteous people. Like his antagonist in competing with Carmen is actually a pretty good guy. He's a bit, he's kind of wheeling his chick or whatever, but that's like whatever. When they bring the troop transport down, he personally, gets out of the plane and starts shooting to try to cover their retreat. So it's like all these like people that are, it generates people that are dedicated to the society they are, which we would call the state. But in their, I'll just argue on the side of the.
Okay, it's
easier just to do it adversarial, right? Because I'm not actually advocating for it, but
it's also a war state that creates its own enemies.
Yeah, an external enemy for Earth would be a godsend. We could really get our shit together,
Mike's advocating for alien enemies. I like it.
So did Reagan.
Paul Krugman.
So did Reagan, the Union Buster.
Think of all that stimulus if we just prepared for an alien invasion.
Yeah, it would be fabulous. Wouldn't it be great for the economy?
Oh, we could break so many windows too.
Robert, I want to go back on what you were trying to get at, though, because you were trying to pose a question and we kept cutting you off.
Oh yeah, what was I saying?
Well, see, it would help if I listened.
Oh, no, if it helped, but I remember what I was talking about too.
You were saying that it was not a high functioning society, and
yeah, okay. So to Mike's point about the high functioning society, I see what you're saying. Like everybody's on board with the society. Like everybody's kind of in agreement about this, how thing works, and everybody's pretty much on board.
And there's also a high level of technology. They got starships and,
right,
huge buildings.
But a lot of the starships also blew up because of their actions.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people died because of their actions.
Yeah, but they were failures. They just got to learn to win.
It's inevitable. If you go around as this war state that has to justify all these soldiers and all these starships and all these weapons you're making, you're going to find an enemy.
Yeah, no,
you're going to go screw around with these bugs who just want to be left alone. So they go to these planet and slaughter them all and have it act like this exciting. What was it? I likened it to watching this movie was like watching frat boys go to war, and how awesome it was. Just chugging a beer and gunning down some bug on an alien planet, and how woo!
Oh, they weren't
some rock music, and
they weren't lackadaisical about it. Is the point? Because that's what's interesting about this film. He doesn't really ridicule it. He satirizes it. Like they lock everything down. Everybody is highly obedient and quite useful in critical situations. And for the most part, people succeed and fail on their own merits with no nanny state to protect them. It's a paternal state of this sort of angry sort of father energy. It's like a hyper masculinity. And so oh man, kind of cut off the rails there. But I don't know, failures made public. People step down when they make mistakes, stuff like that, right? And the one thing this society doesn't have is Marxists. So it's like what's the author's name? Heinlein. So I think he just was caught up with that. I think that was his answer to Marxism.
Oh yeah, he definitely smacks down Marxism. In the Sargon video, he talks about how Marxism and the labor theory of value is a complete joke.
Yeah. But it's just might is right? So if people die in war, then they should have, ideally that they were, confident, strengthful, or strong people enough to have bred and then died in war, and then their offspring makes the next set of troops and pushes the gene pool forward and the people of Earth forward, our species dominating the galaxy now and forever.
Yeah, let's talk about the idea of this, how wonderful force is.
He doesn't even consider that the bugs, the rhetoric is that they don't even consider that they should talk to them, right, or that humanity shouldn't dominate the galaxy now and forever.
Yes.
It's not even on the table. Oh man, it's nice to have clear clear understandings on positions, and everybody, like, you're talking to somebody and they declare what they are. That doesn't happen very much in our society. So that's kind of a sort of a bonus. Even if they're all super fascists, at least you know where they stand. Most fascists don't tell you they're fascists anymore.
No, they claim they're social democrats.
Yeah. Well, they claim they're freeing you and enlightening you by force.
Now, Robert, you mentioned something about they're manufacturing an enemy or manufacturing a threat, but didn't the bugs hurl asteroids at Earth, and didn't they have like a defense like space station that would shoot the asteroids before they would hit the planet? So were they not being attacked, or was that all propaganda in the film?
That was propaganda.
Yeah, I think that was propaganda, that they were, attacked by the bugs first. I thought
But Buenos Aires did get destroyed by the asteroid that they run into in the ship, right? And then their communications array gets destroyed, so they can't warn Earth, and then it hits the planet. So,
which is a great propaganda piece to use.
Yeah, it's like if like a boat was sunk by Vietnam or something, you could
or like a country attacks a harbor at some point,
or like the World Trade Centers were attacked, so you need to invade 2 separate countries.
All right,
it's almost like there's a catalyzing event that could be used towards your militaristic desires.
Right, but in this scenario, the ship was there, and they would have warned Earth if their communications array had worked. So it was not like hey, we're going to let this happen so that we have, a run on nationalism and patriotism and get people signing up to go and kill bugs.
They didn't even need
you don't necessarily have to manufacture a thing.
They didn't even need that, though. Like, they were
all on board anyway.
They already had the army.
It was just Rico who changed his mind.
Yeah.
It's only Rico. They wouldn't have had Rico otherwise, but they had Rico.
I think they mention that we sort of invaded their territory first.
I believe that's true.
Yeah, because the Mormon outpost, John Smith or whatever, was in place, and they were all massacred. And apparently, they had their space, and we sort of started colonizing it, and then they started coming back after us. And then which is interesting, only then did we view them as realize that we were at war when they started attacking us, not when we were attacking them. Just, you could transpose it onto some interventionist policies.
All kinds of things. That happens, yeah.
Now, when the Mormon camp got attacked, the voiceover in the "Would you like to know more?" Which, by the way, their internet interface was actually pretty spot on
for the time.
Yeah, I mean, you watch that and you're like, oh yeah, I could see that being a web page. But
it's linear, right? There's not like you don't type in what you want, you get told what you want. Like,
there were tabs. You had tab browsing.
Yeah.
Different things,
But like all that's curated, right? The way like Facebook's kind of curated.
Yeah, but back to the Mormon thing. The voiceover basically said, well, the Mormons settled there against the wishes of the Federation.
Yes. So they were told they weren't allowed to do that.
Right. So if that's the catalyst for this whole chain of events, where some group went rogue and disobeyed authority and then got slaughtered, and now that authority is going to retaliate. Is that what we're saying is happening here?
To Robert's point, those people had to leave the society in order to be as free as they wanted to be, presumably.
Right. And the Federation could have just said, well, they chose to live outside our protection, and they got what they deserve.
No, but
But they got a war state. They got to feed the beast, baby.
Yeah, it reminds me of Troy, right? Where 50,000 Spartans didn't come here to negotiate peace.
Yeah.
You don't get the army ready and then just not fuck somebody up with it.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's like the excuse for the military-industrial complex these days. Well, we built this weapon system that's meant to fight like a previous war, so we might as well use it.
We built this nuke. We're not just going to let it sit there.
I don't know. There's a certain level of, the secular libertarian fascism of Napoleon, right? I mean, there's arguments for progress being made through force, I guess.
Progress?
Well, it frees up space, right? For people to so you build
killing the people that were there? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's that. I mean, our countries are built on native burial grounds, but what existed in France before the revolution, before terrorism and then authoritative, France as an empire under Napoleon, right, was not as good as what came after. So there was more liberty to be had by way of temporary authority, temporary fascism and collectivism. So it's interesting how history plays out that way. We build systems through violence and authority that create space for people to be liberal inside of them, and then they become corrupt, and then we get tired of that, and we purge through violence, and then we cycle through again. That makes sense. That's too much.
No, it sounds interesting. And we're actually next week going to do Les Miserables.
Oh, right on.
Which will be basically the flip side of this authoritarian coin, I think, with the Robespierre.
Those guys revolt at the drop of a hat, and I'm not even sure why half the time. But I mean, in France, the communists and Nazis have united against the government, so they done screwed up bad. If you can get commies and Nazis to agree on fighting you, you're probably not a very good government.
All right, well, let's shift this back to one of my favorite tropes, and that is the unlimited ammunition in the guns. And also, early in the film, the guns are hardly effective against the bugs, but then as the film progresses, the guns become quite effective, and I find that kind of interesting.
Precision.
It's an increased skill level.
Yes.
And you got to learn to shoot them at a specific part.
They're getting more crit damage.
They leveled up.
Yeah, they're veterans, I think.
Okay, yeah, their experience level went up.
They put more skill points into the accuracy.
Yeah.
Panzer General or whatever.
Yeah, instead of increasing the weapon, they're getting like double damage bonuses.
Right, and they do make a point with Doogie Howser where, well, you have to shoot him in this very specific spot, and that knocks out their nervous system or something.
Yeah, and so by the end of the movie, they're all battle hardened. While he's, now the new batch of 12-year-olds has come, but the veterans are able to take out because in the first battle it was about 10-1 human casualties to bug casualties, and then by the end they're taking out scores of them, hundreds.
Yeah, can we talk about that just a little bit? This movie, it was definitely made by somebody who has no understanding of battles or anything like that. There are no squad tactics. There's just a horde of humans running into one area, and then there's some bugs there, and then they all shoot, kind of, sort of, this area, at this angle. I'm shooting over here. I'm shooting over there. Oh, I might have just shot my friend in the head. I don't know. There's no firing line. And then some of my friends get slaughtered, and there's no concept of taking ground or holding areas or covering each other or movement at all. It's just horde goes this way, horde goes that way. Oh, we all got slaughtered. Oh, run away. It was ridiculous.
It's like watching 8-year-olds play soccer.
Yeah. No, those were I was going to say retarded, but it's just those are very dumb tactics. But the Sky Marshal resigned.
Calling them tactics at all.
No, just dump a bunch of infantry on the battlefield. I guess in the book it's mechs. It's like battle mechs, but
yeah, it's like super mech suit power suit.
That doesn't. The whole point was that they were like idiots running.
Oh yeah, well that's effective.
Blindly into battle. And what I liked is that it's a society too though, where the guy that made those decisions immediately steps down. He finds his position. So,
but a good chunk of this movie is shown the Roughnecks training. Rico is in this training situation.
Oh, their training was ridiculous too, though.
That was ridiculous too. I understand. It was the laser tag where he's doing flips and stuff, and it was just like him playing football. But there was no understanding or concept of cover fire, taking cover, movement at all.
Well, they did mention it during the live fire exercise where one guy got shot in the head, that he was interfering with somebody's line of fire because his helmet was malfunctioning. So they did make one allusion to there being some tactics involved.
But then as soon as they start fighting, this goes out the window. Just who cares? Let's just shoot each other in the head.
Yeah, they certainly did just dump a ton of infantry. It's like a risk battle.
Yeah,
pile, a handful.
That the reason that they did not have tactics might have been because they underestimated the intelligence of the bugs. Because the ships were saying, "Oh, the anti-aircraft fire coming from the planet is just random and periodic, and we don't need to worry about it."
Mm-hmm.
And then they realize it's concentrated and it's actually hitting the ships, and they're like, "Oh, our military intelligence is totally wrong. We underestimated," and that was what resulted in the air marshal demoting themselves or stepping down because they had underestimated the enemy. They had bad intelligence, bad information that led to wholesale slaughter of their invading force.
I'll grant you that. I'll grant you they underestimated their opponent, but that still doesn't excuse not having clear firing lines. You still don't want your own soldiers shooting each other in the head.
No, but Paul Verhoeven's leftist. He doesn't understand how wars work.
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean,
Sorry?
I haven't seen any of his other work, so I don't know if he just has the soldiers running around. But.
Yeah, I mean, even RoboCop, right? It's all very simple. But again, I think that sells the story that he's telling anyway, and the ideas in it. And what's interesting, here's a libertarian idea that overlaps into this National Socialist utopianist sort of idea, is that the competition, right? So they had lectured into stupidity because they hadn't been in a war soon enough, right? And what they needed was some competition to innovate better tactics, which they started utilizing immediately afterwards. So the guy that failed steps down, a new person, a woman of color, comes up and has better tactics,
How prescient.
informs a better strategy to the military force, and then the military force starts using more economical tactics.
That only makes sense if this is a brand new society that just was poofed into existence yesterday. You would think that they have some understanding of history. They're talking about Carthage and whatever.
Hitler read Napoleon and he still invaded Russia.
At least Hitler had some idea of tactics.
Oh. No, I mean, you're right. I'm just saying the explanation would be that they lectured from not having a war. So they needed a war, right?
Oh, I think they need a war. This is the kind of society that needs a war, for sure.
Yeah, fresh meat for the grinder.
Yeah. Well, and that guy died. Like, that guy lost his legs and his arm in something.
Right.
I'm assuming purging all of Asia from the world in their society. Because I don't know. I'm like, because there's no Marxism, there's no collectivism, there's only certain visible races as well, which I'm sure.
No, wait a minute.
Media would have a field day with that.
Hang on. No collectivism. Come on now.
Oh, okay. Sorry. There's no. Yeah, I meant to say Marxism. I just was getting sick of using that word.
Okay, because this is a very collectivist society.
Yeah, sorry. It's a very collectivist society. It's a different kind of collectivism. So it's like these two competing collectivisms, which would have formed massive blocks for their revolution, which I'm assuming like was some sort of global social democracy. And they're like, well, we like the socialism part, but what about this? We'll put some fascism in there, right?
Well, they did say that democracy had failed.
Yeah.
And
well, so it's destined to, isn't it?
Right. And they were building on the ashes of that.
Yeah. So,
what do you think of Rico's parents being very anti-war?
Well, wait a minute. Before we get into that, you just said a very interesting thing, Daniel. Hang on.
Wait, what?
Table that question. You say interesting things from time to time. It's true. You said that democracy had failed, and it's true. They mentioned that in the movie, but then they also talk about having politicians running for office once you serve. So which is it?
Well, I think they're speaking to mass democracy where everyone can vote.
Yeah. So just specialized.
Yeah.
Service only democracy
works great. Because
okay.
If you've been in a war, then you know how to run a country better.
Yeah, democracy plus.
Like they introduced
democracy plus. Exactly.
Here. Yeah.
They want only the best to go to the hierarchy or up the hierarchy, because if you don't have to do that, then people that are just really good at talking shit can get elected. So I guess that's the argument.
Ever. I don't know what you're talking about. Now, Daniel, go back to what you were saying, buddy. Sorry.
So his parents, Rico's parents, were very anti him joining up and becoming a citizen, and he was doing it to impress a girl, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't even into him.
That guy's an idiot, man. What's her name? Dex. Dex is way better. 100% better. She's a quarterback. She ran shit. Much better mate.
Yeah, she was a little bit too good of a quarterback for me. Did you see her like laying those guys out?
Yeah, but this is also a world where, like, because they've got this perfect society, there are certain individuals that are able to become quite exceptional. So, and everything about the tone and visuals in this film are so over the top. It's hyper masculine, tons of gore, violence. He's running to get the football touchdown, and he does a backflip over 3 people. He doesn't just deke somebody out. He does a backflip, and then everybody, like, it's just it embraces what it's satirizing, which is why I think Verhoeven does such a good job with this. Is because like the people in this utopian society are exceptional. So why wouldn't she be like that, right? Everybody else is exceptional.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So it's within it. It doesn't break the system. It doesn't break the rules of the universe that are created, if that makes sense. It obeys its own rules.
Yeah, I can't say there was ever a time where I was like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I mean, other than the idea that a super advanced space force would be totally caught off guard by some bugs shooting at them and not knowing what that is. Like, they wouldn't scout out anything. They wouldn't do any kind of...
They haven't had a war in like 10 years, so they've all lectured. They're idiots. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to have the frat boys attack, I guess they're not going to do any prep work. They're the guys that copied off the other kids in school, so they're not going to do their homework on the enemies they're about to fight.
Right?
All right, so back to the parent. He does say to him, there ought to be a law that you can't use a school as a recruiting station.
He also says that he would rather be lashed in Times Square or in City Center or whatever than have his boy join the army, which I thought was something you guys might latch on to. Corporal punishment for adults in public.
Well,
essentially happens to Rico.
Yep. That's almost more reasonable because it's the military, though. Like they whip citizens that step out of line.
There's a difference in the way that the movie and the book handled that scene, where Rico's telling his dad about joining up, and his dad is upset about the school encouraging him to join up, And he says, no, he doesn't encourage us at all. In the movie, the dad's like, well, oh, okay, good. But in the book, the dad goes, basically, he says, well, that's just, reverse psychology. What they're doing is telling you you're not good enough so that then you'll go out and prove them wrong.
Oh, so his dad's smarter in the book.
Yeah, he's smarter in the book.
In the movie, well, everything's so over the top in the movie, though, right? Like the tone is just, it's a Djangoist, patriotic, rousing.
Yeah, I could see why that was stripped out for the movie, for sure.
Well, because it essentially plays like propaganda to me. Right? It's propaganda for a society that doesn't exist, which is like brilliant to me. Because like you can either be on board with it, it's kind of a bit like Team America, where it simultaneously ridicules America and also kind of says, yeah, there's some kick-ass stuff there, at the same time.
Right.
Fuck yeah.
Walmart, books.
All right, so the main thing that I wanted to get out of this discussion, so let's just fire into it without skipping over it and leaving it for me for my final summary and review.
Robert's bringing his knife to a nuke fight here.
This is it. This is the one thing I want to talk about. Then we can talk about whatever else. I don't care. So the main scene that I kind of latched onto, where's Rico's in class and he's like making a little note for his girlfriend and they're kind of giving each other fuck me eyeballs and stuff like that. And the history and ethics teacher, who later turns out to be like their corporal commander guy, he's talking about how naked force has solved more issues than anything else in history. And it seems like the movie is making that claim that force is just fantastic, but maybe not necessarily fantastic. Maybe it's amoral. There's nothing moral or immoral about it. Just is the fact of the matter is that force solves problems. And I would agree with that if and only if you look at life through a keyhole. If you look at it in this one instance, like this guy is causing you problems, you kill that man. Oh, look at that, problem solved. But that totally ignores all the surrounding implications of the negative effects that come across. Like, say, in the movie, he talks about, or in the book, it's Carthage. In the movie, I think it's Hiroshima. But in the book, he's saying, well, Carthage was destroyed by Rome, therefore force is an effective means of solving problems. But, a lot of people hated and resented the Romans for hundreds of years. They fought and they killed Romans. Maybe some people resented the fact that Rome just wiped out Carthage. Actions have consequences and repercussions beyond their immediate effects. And to say that, well, if I just solve this problem with violence, it doesn't have any other negative effects, and it's not going to bring any further, condemnation or people wanting to disassociate with me or anything like that, is really doing yourself a disservice. Saying that, well, we're just going to solve all our problems with violence, and then we'll just be great, and we'll be the best space force ever, and there'll never be a greater space force ever. And yeah, I don't know. I'm eager to hear your thoughts about that. I mean, we're all non-aggressionists, so it seems to me like that's different.
Well, I've got a short take on that, and I think that his point about violence solving a lot of problems is a derivative of history and by history, I mean the study of history is so fraught with dates and places of wars. And history is written by the victors, as they say. And so wars play a very central role in the narrative that we tell ourselves about our own past. And when the history is written by the victors, it's those who were victorious in war, and thus their side gets shown as the benevolent side or the good side, and the vanquished are the evil, the bad. And so it's very easy, I think, to see if that's your narrative, then the victors are victorious because they're righteous, and because they're righteous, they solved a problem.
Right. I agree with you that history is written from a perspective of the winners and saying that, these are great people, these warmongering tyrants. They're all fantastic. The greatest human beings in history are these mass murdering tyrant people. But it ignores so much. The psychological toll of being a mass murderer has got to take some kind of toll on you, on the condemnation from others, on just all kinds of sociological ramifications.
Like blowback, like we're experiencing from the Middle East now, like Ron Paul warned about, or even the top-down war collectivism, the war planning that would go on and basically destroy all these economic resources and retard production and the standard of living for entire populations for a generation.
Right. It's the seen versus the unseen. Absolutely. All this effort put into war and fighting and force is not going into all kinds of, who knows what the market would produce. Just tons and tons of prosperous things, the things that you might prefer.
Yeah, war is kind of the ultimate form of inefficient consumerism. You get to destroy stuff, and then rebuilding it is beneficial to the people that produce that thing, but no one else. since they don't get to keep their shit. But I think the movie is approaching this particular conundrum from the perspective of like Fay Victus, like woe to the conquered, right? So naked aggression is solved in in quotation marks. He's using that expression, not me. More problems or more situations than any other thing, and I think that it's a matter of like a naturalist argument of like, it's all well and good to have high ideals and to have prosperity, but if you can't defend yourself, then it's of no consequence because being conquered sucks.
Well, I'm on board with that. Fully on board with defending yourself and being strong and powerful and armed and all that good stuff.
Well, and then they just extend that into the preemptive, right? Which is kind of why you're able to sell a population on attacking another country that is smaller than you or less powerful. So I think it's also a naturalist argument in the sense of like the strong, it's almost a eugenic kind of proposition, right? Like Nazism in that sense. Like in the what this guy is proposing was more about creating a strong, healthy race of human beings, right? It seemed like the multi-ethnic human race, but the gene pool was being pushed forward by way of constantly challenging ourselves and finding enemies to fight with it, either with ourselves or externally. So I think that's the naked force argument, is that nature is at a glance incredibly violent, and evolution is driven by, at least in part, by violence as well as cooperation, if that makes sense. So that's my apologetic side of
fair enough. I would argue that cooperation and voluntary exchange has done far more for humanity and civilization than violence and war ever has.
But it goes underappreciated.
To the conquered, right?
It goes way underappreciated. It gets, as soon as some great thing comes along and makes everybody richer, everybody gets all like butthurt that they don't have a bigger share of it, or they get, as soon as it happens and it gets taken away, then they feel entitled to it.
To your point about mass murder, we tend to create narratives that make people feel better about mass murder. That's the whole point of history, right? Is to, woe to the conquered, and then the hero is given exaltation and adoration. I mean, ideally, right?
To some, but not to others. I mean, for the French, Napoleon was this great guy for the most part, and to everybody he murdered, not so good.
No, I mean, that's where the word terrorism comes from, is the intermittent stuff leading up to that. But again, it's like you're seizing power from chaos, right? So like this is I'm just gonna assume the apologetic side of this. I don't care. Just call me fascist.
You do you. Do it, Mike.
All right, so somebody else would otherwise seize the power from the chaos. So the strongest person should do that. It's at least naked aggression, as opposed to the Machiavellian model of politics and insurrection, corruption, and deceit. So the satire presented in Starship Troopers is funny because he depicts a world full of people that say exactly what they believe. And even if they're in conflict with somebody, and their conflicts are resolved through immediate violence, and they're all clear on their positions, and the people that succeed or fail do so essentially on their own merits. And even in selecting a mate, you're asserting dominance, and you're finding that through that system, right? So that's the benefit that's being portrayed satirically, like to boot, in the film, which is, I think, what we're supposed to talk about. So
you're right. I would argue that the film shows a very surface level view of these people. It has a kind of a perspective, and they all kind of act accordingly. It's not a more nuanced, like three-dimensional show like Game of Thrones or something like that, where you have all these gray characters all operating on their own, desires.
What's interesting about as libertarians, you guys want to get rid of the nanny state, right? Like, this movie has no nanny state.
Well, it sort of does.
Well, in the sense of the military, but there's no
Hang on, you guys are talking over each other. Hang on.
Oh yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so it is a bit of an nanny state, but more in a quid pro quo kind of situation. Like if you do military service, you gain citizenship and will pay for Harvard, and you'll get a license to have babies, which is a bit of a social engineering thing.
Yeah, so it's a eugenic nanny state versus a dysgenic nanny state, right? And you guys are trying to find the balance between these two authoritarian models that is functioning, right? Which is with, liberty, which, like you say, outperforms every other system if it can manifest and defend itself.
It absolutely can.
Oh, it can, except for like corruption and people being able to form unions with submissive people within systems that are prosperous, because prosperity breeds, it waxes the sort of pool of people you're able to choose from, and some people aren't able to perform at the highest level, and then you get those people together and you form a union, and then you get them to argue collectively against the next thing, and you start voting in blocks and undermining those systems, right? So it's interesting to me that like on the two ends of the spectrum are kind of the authoritative models, and then you're trying to find this balance, and the balance is you're always just like have to be vigilant about what is attacking that freedom model. But like viruses are less likely to survive in a dynamic system than a homogeneous system, so it's got that going for it as well.
So you're likening the virus of envy being the driving factor here?
Yeah, I mean, like that can just be assimilated and used to the advantage of the society in a free market, right? It can also be utilized it can be utilized to a much more negative sort of extent in the authoritative models. But I would say that like out of the two, the eugenic version of authority is better than the dysgenic version of authority, if I had to apologize for the one.
All right, now just for the sake of the folks at home who are going to have heard of eugenics in the most negative way.
Yeah, the Hitlerian sense?
Right, but you're speaking of it in a very descriptive way. So can you just 10 seconds on each so that we understand?
Okay, so nature drives us towards evolution. We mate select based on strength and wealth accumulation, things like that. If you provide incentives negative to that, like such as, it's the the idiocracy model, right? So we have contraception and we have social infrastructure that provides coddling for people, and so it's dysgenic in the sense that like smarter people are going to have less kids, and dumber people are supported in having kids, so they're going to outpace the smart people essentially and breed down the IQ over time. If you accept the idea that two dumb parents are likely to have a dumb kid and two smart parents are likely to have a smart kid, but apparently we don't have to accept that biological truth anymore, even in terms of probability. Eugenic systems are like what nature creates, naturally through competition and or cooperation, where people are driven towards successful mating practices based on meritocracy, right? So like a peacock has certain kind of bloom, and then the female selects the male with the nicest one that she can get, and they have like a kid that has like an even nicer bloom. I don't know. So that's the eugenic side. It kind of got out of hand in the 30s, they tell me, the ideas regarding this and race and identity and stuff. I think there's plenty of comparisons in the media right now from other media sources about that time in our history. I'm not aware of this, but I recommend people study that part of our history, humanities history, ad nauseum, because there's a lot to unpack. But anyway, dysgenic means you're promoting. I can't do it without actually sounding like a fascist.
You mean like positive traits?
Yeah, like
it's like two smart, big, strong people get together and they make a big, strong.
Yeah, that's a eugenic principle, and then
it's a positive eugenic principle. Negative eugenic principle would be you take a person with undesirable traits, like with propensity towards disease, and you castrate that person or something like that, which is what the United States did in the 20s and the 30s.
They were doing what the Nazis did better than the Nazis, right?
Hitler looked at the American model and said, hey, that's a good idea.
Okay. Well, I knew we could not get through this without mentioning Hitler. It's my fault.
It is.
Talking about eugenics.
I'm glad you accept responsibility.
Sorry, guys. Anyway,
Hitler's a good point as any to get in our final summary and review, as we've been going about an hour already.
Nice.
So why don't we do that? Or are there any last points before we get into that?
I'm easy. I would, I'd like to make a stronger point at the end there without sounding like a Nazi, but c'est la vie. I get called a cuck or a Nazi one conversation a day, so.
Both simultaneously, it seems.
Sometimes, not often, but generally depends on which echo chamber I visit.
All right. Well, Mike, you've been a great guest again, and why don't we start with you for the final summary and review, and you can open with your final defense of your position and then get into your rating for the movie.
Well, like I said, Mr. Verhoeven makes satire so compelling. He makes the thing he's satirizing seem awesome. I think the total lack of restraint in his filmmaking is fantastic. The shot composition, the dialogue is all over the top, nothing subtle. It really portrays this society not as an action film, but more as a propaganda piece. Maybe action films are always propaganda pieces, and he's just putting his foot down on the pedal. Who knows? I don't mind apologetics. I will certainly enjoy that kind of thought experiment. So all said, I think it's a great action film. You can get a lot out of it. It gets you thinking. So 11 out of 10.
Wow, the first time we we break the bank on the rating. We turned this all the way to 11, and we haven't even done Spinal Tap yet. So
Well, didn't Mike give a 10 out of 10?
he did, and then the Anarchist Mom gave Lord of the Rings a 10 out of 10.
And now we've got an 11 out of 10. This is getting out of control. We got to rein this back in.
I'm devaluing your
This rating system. Center inflationary properly.
I'm just pointing out
Venezuela.
the possible flaws in it to your benefit.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Well, I'll take a turn here. I felt like this movie was horrifically long, and I hadn't seen it since it came out. And so I didn't really remember too much of it prior to watching it again, other than it had a high cheese factor, and it really rang through watching it this time. But I also found that there was a lot of intellectual, philosophical points trying to be made, like with Jester. That was Rayshak, right? He played Jester in Top Gun. That it really did bring a lot to the table to kind of consider and think about. It really is a utopian/dystopian society, this militaristic world government situation with the Federation. I don't think that it would have functioned at the high level that it was portrayed in the film. I do think that there were some improvements over present day situations, as far as like there being some skin in the game for having voting in the political process, like we mentioned earlier on. Not that I advocate for really any political process. I think that people should be their own sovereigns and make their own individual choices for themselves, be able to exchange with others in a mutually beneficial arrangement, the law of association, etc. But it does bring a lot to discuss. I'm going to go with a 7.2 out of 10 on this one. So I do recommend watching it. I do recommend listening to this show after you watch it, and then consider some of the points that we've made, and let us know, like on the Facebook page or on our website. You can give us some comments, give us some feedback on what you thought about what we were talking about. Hit us up on YouTube, etc. But 7.2 for me. So I'm going to bring down the average that was over 10 from our guest here, and we'll go to Robert for your summary and review.
All right. Well, I'm glad you both give such good, interesting reviews. Thank you, Mike, for bringing up the idea that this movie is a propaganda piece, and that all war movies are inherently propaganda pieces. It's really impossible to not see once you kind of adopt our psychology, like a Saving Private Ryan, or almost any movie, even something like Full Metal Jacket, which is kind of more of a negative war movie. There's still a lot of pro arguments to be had in war, like the positive aspects of war and that sort of thing. Anyway, this movie, it can be enjoyed on so many different levels. It still holds up. It's a lot of fun. It is very vivid. I don't know if you want to call it that. Like, it's like normal reality cranked up to 11. And it's very, Saturday TV morning fun cartoon. And it's just a fun bug hunt. I did not feel the 2-hour runtime. It was just fun to me, maybe because I enjoy just the silliness of all of the action and the antlions from Half-Life 2 looking real good. But I'd say this is a strong 7.5, slightly better than Daniel's view. Maybe just the length didn't bother me as much, but it's got levels. It's like an onion. It's got layers. It's more than meets the eye. It's a lot of fun.
All right, well, very good. And I think that'll about do it for this episode here. And we can't see Mike's trying to show us something on the screen, which you could also view if you were a live stream supporter at lastnighters.com/Patreon.
Just the average.
Oh, he's showing the average. What is the average from our three?
It's like 86% or something.
All right, 8.5.
Yeah.
On the aggregate from us on the Last Nighters here tonight. So, final comments on the show here is we want to thank you, Mike, for being our guest. People can check out your music on SoundCloud at Mechanical Dream Revolution. We will have that posted on the show notes page at lastnighters.com/57. And next week, we're going to see the other side of this horseshoe. We're going to flip the coin, the other side of the authoritarianism, and talk about the French Revolution as we discuss Les Miserables. We're doing the 2012 version with Hugh Jackman. It's apparently a musical that is well over 3 hours long, almost 4. So it's going to be quite lengthy, but it should be a fruitful discussion. We will have a special guest, and I will let you know who that is on the Facebook page sometime this week. We just need to nail that down. But that will be the show next week. Les Miserables on Last Nighters. So with that, I'll say good night from last night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.